In this video, we revisit the sites of the world's most famous disasters and see what stands there today. Pompeii, beneath Mount Vesuvius, Italy. The Roman city of some 20,000 people buried under 20 feet of ash and pumice when Vesuvius erupted in August of 79 AD. The residents entombed so suddenly that the cavities their bodies left in the hardened ash could later be filled with plaster to recreate their final postures. Rediscovered and excavated over the past 3 centuries, now one of the most visited archaeological sites on Earth. The streets walkable, the frescoes intact, the plaster figures still curled where they fell, the volcano that destroyed the city still active and looming over Naples, 3 million people now living in its shadow, because the most fertile soil in Italy is the soil a volcano leaves behind. The city that died in a day preserved more completely than any city that lived. Hiroshima, Japan. The city at the center of the first atomic bomb used in war, detonated at 8:15 on the morning of August 6, 1945, killing as many as 140,000 people by the end of the year, and flattening everything for miles. Rebuilt almost entirely into a modern city of over 1 million, with a single skeletal ruin deliberately preserved at the hypocenter, the Genbaku Dome, the gutted shell of an exhibition hall left exactly as the blast left it, surrounded now by the Peace Memorial Park, the river that carried the dead flowing past office towers and trams. The city that was chosen because it had been spared conventional bombing, kept intact only so the world could see what one bomb could do. Pearl Harbor, Oahu, Hawaii. The naval base attacked without warning on December 7, 1941, the strike that pulled the United States into the Second World War, sinking the battleship USS Arizona with over 1,000 men still aboard. The Arizona never raised, its wreck resting in the harbor where it sank, oil still seeping to the surface in droplets sailors call the tears of the Arizona. A white memorial built across the hull, visitors floating above the rusting deck of a tomb that has never stopped weeping into the water. The harbor still an active naval base, warships passing daily over the grave the attack created. Chernobyl, Pripyat, Ukraine. The nuclear plant whose reactor number 4 exploded during a safety test on April 26, 1986, releasing more radiation than the Hiroshima bomb and forcing the permanent evacuation of an entire region. The reactor, first entombed in a hastily poured concrete sarcophagus, then sealed beneath a vast steel arch, the new safe confinement, slid into place in 2016 to contain it for a century. The city of Pripyat left frozen, the forest reclaiming the streets, wolves and wild horses moving through apartments where 50,000 people once lived. The most contaminated place on the planet becoming, in the absence of humans, one of its largest accidental wildlife refuges. Titanic, departed Southampton, England, lost in the North Atlantic. The ship called Unsinkable, that struck an iceberg on the night of April 14, 1912, and sank in under 3 hours, taking more than 1,500 lives because there were lifeboats for barely half aboard. The wreck, found in 1985, lying 2.5 miles down, slowly being eaten by iron-consuming bacteria that will one day leave nothing but a stain on the seabed. Southampton lined with memorials to the crew who came from its streets. The Belfast Slipway, where the hull was built, now the site of a museum shaped like the prow. The ship that was supposed to prove human mastery over the ocean dissolving on the ocean floor while the cities that built and launched it sell tickets to its memory. Mount St. Helens, Washington State. The volcano that erupted on May 18, 1980, with a lateral blast that flattened 230 square miles of forest, killed 57 people, and removed the top 1,300 feet of the mountain in seconds. Now the heart of a national volcanic monument, the blast zone slowly returning to life, fireweed and elk colonizing the gray plain, a new lava dome building inside the crater, the mountain that blew itself apart becoming a living laboratory for how a landscape heals, the most studied eruption in history quietly rebuilding the forest it erased. Johnstown, Pennsylvania. The steel town devastated on May 31, 1889, when the poorly maintained South Fork Dam, holding back a private lake for a fishing club of wealthy industrialists, collapsed and sent 20 million tons of water down the valley, killing over 2,200 people in minutes. The dam never rebuilt, its broken earthen ends still standing on the hillside, now part of the Johnstown Flood National Memorial. The town rebuilt below, having flooded again twice in the century since. The disaster caused by the carelessness of the rich, preserved as a monument on the very ground where their dam gave way. Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh, India. The Union Carbide pesticide plant that leaked 40 tons of toxic methyl isocyanate gas over the sleeping city on the night of December 2nd and 3rd, 1984, killing thousands within days and tens of thousands in the years that followed, the worst industrial disaster in history. The plant never properly cleaned, abandoned, and left to rust where it stands, its tanks and pipes corroding, the soil and groundwater still contaminated decades later, families still living in its shadow, drinking water the disaster poisoned, the factory that killed them still standing because no one would pay to take it down. Aberfan, Wales, the mining village where, on the morning of October 21, 1966, a rain-soaked mountain of colliery waste slid down the hillside and engulfed the village school, killing 116 children and 28 adults, almost an entire generation of the town in a single moment. The spoil tips removed, the school site cleared and turned into a memorial garden, 2 rows of arches in the cemetery marking the graves of the children, the village that lost its children to the coal that fed it, the green garden now standing where the classroom stood, silent at the exact hour the tip came down. Centralia, Pennsylvania. The coal town where a fire ignited in the mine beneath it in 1962, possibly from burning trash in an old pit, and never went out, spreading through the coal seams under the streets. The ground growing hot, sinkholes opening, toxic gases venting from cracks, the town condemned, and nearly all of its 1,000 residents bought out and relocated through the 1980s and 1990s. The buildings demolished, the street grid still faintly visible through the regrowing trees, smoke still rising from the ground after more than 60 years. The town that burned from below, abandoned to a fire expected to keep burning for another 2 centuries. Vajont Dam, near Longarone, Italy. The dam completed in 1959 in a narrow alpine gorge, among the tallest in the world, behind which the mountainside collapsed into the reservoir on October 9, 1963, displacing a wave that overtopped the dam by hundreds of feet and obliterated the town of Longarone below, killing around 2,000 people. The dam itself surviving almost completely intact, holding firm while everything beneath it was destroyed, now a memorial walked by visitors. The structure that worked perfectly and killed thousands anyway, a monument to engineering that solved the wrong problem. Lockerbie, Scotland. The town over which Pan Am Flight 103 exploded on December 21, 1988, brought down by a bomb, killing all 259 aboard and 11 residents on the ground when a wing section full of fuel struck a row of houses and left a crater where a street had been. The destroyed houses rebuilt, the crater filled, a memorial garden created at the cemetery, the names of the dead inscribed in stone, a quiet Scottish town whose name became permanently attached to a catastrophe that fell out of its sky. the streets rebuilt so completely that visitors struggle to find where the wreckage came down. Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. The harbor city where, on December 6, 1917, a French ship loaded with wartime explosives collided with another vessel and detonated in the largest man-made explosion before the atomic age, flattening the north end of the city, killing nearly 2,000 people and blinding hundreds who had been watching the fire from their windows. The devastated district rebuilt, a memorial bell tower raised on the hill, and every year a Christmas tree sent to Boston in thanks for the aid the city rushed north. The harbor still busy, the explosion remembered each December by the tree lit in a city 1,000 miles away. The Great Molasses Flood, North End, Boston, Massachusetts. The disaster of January 15, 1919, when a giant tank of molasses burst and sent a wave of 2.5 million gallons through the streets at 35 miles an hour, killing 21 people and crushing buildings. The sweet smell said to linger for decades. The tank never rebuilt, the site now a city park with bocce courts and a baseball field, a small plaque the only marker. The strangest deadly disaster in American history paved over into a place where children play, the absurdity of the cause doing nothing to lessen the weight of the dead. Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, Greenwich Village, New York. The garment factory where 146 workers, most of them young immigrant women, died on March 25, 1911, when a fire swept the upper floors and they found the exit doors locked to prevent theft, many leaping from the 9th floor windows to the street. The building itself surviving completely intact, now the Brown Building, owned by New York University. Classrooms where the sewing machines once ran. A plaque on the corner and the names read aloud each year. The tragedy that forced the modern workplace safety laws still standing as an ordinary campus building students pass without looking up. The Great Chicago Fire, Chicago, Illinois. The blaze that began on the night of October 8, 1871, reportedly near a barn on DeKoven Street, and burned for 2 days across the wooden city, killing some 300 people and destroying the heart of Chicago. The exact site of the barn now occupied, by deliberate irony, by the Chicago Fire Department's training academy. The city rebuilt in stone and steel and, within 2 decades, inventing the skyscraper on the cleared ground. The fire that nearly ended the city becoming the reason it became one of the great cities of the world. Firefighters now trained on the very spot where it started. The Hindenburg, Lakehurst, New Jersey. The German passenger airship that burst into flame while landing on May 6, 1937. The hydrogen-filled giant consumed in 34 seconds as newsreel cameras rolled, killing 36 people and ending the age of the passenger airship in a single broadcast. The Naval Air Station still in use, the enormous Hangar No. 1 that housed the airship still standing, a marker on the field where the gondola hit the ground. The disaster that killed an entire mode of travel remembered on a working military base, the mooring spot a small bronze plate in the grass. Fukushima Daiichi, Japan. The nuclear plant struck by a tsunami on March 11, 2011 after a massive earthquake, the flooding knocking out cooling systems and triggering meltdowns in 3 reactors, forcing the evacuation of over 150,000 people. The plant now a decades-long decommissioning project. Tanks of treated water crowding the grounds, robots sent into reactors too radioactive for humans. The surrounding towns slowly reopening as the exclusion zone shrinks, some residents returning to homes frozen since the day they fled. The disaster that turned a stretch of Japanese coast into an evacuation map, now being unwound one decontaminated street at a time. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The site of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, destroyed by a truck bomb on April 19, 1995, killing 168 people, including 19 children in the building's daycare, the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in American history. The ruined building demolished, the site transformed into the Oklahoma City National Memorial, 168 empty chairs arranged in rows on the lawn, a reflecting pool between two great gates marking the minute before and the minute after the blast, the survivor tree, an elm that lived through the explosion, still growing at the edge. The block that held a federal office now holding nothing but chairs and water and the names of the dead. Tenerife, Canary Islands, Spain. The airport where two Boeing 747s collided on the runway in dense fog on March 27, 1977, killing 583 people. The deadliest accident in aviation history. The result of a misunderstood clearance and an airport overcrowded after a bombing diverted flights from elsewhere. The airport still operating as Tenerife North, the runway still in use, a spiral staircase memorial built on a nearby hill, the disaster that rewrote the rules of cockpit communication worldwide, the planes long cleared, travelers taking off daily from the strip of asphalt where the deadliest crash in history occurred. Bikini Atoll, Marshall Islands, the ring of coral islands where the United States conducted 23 nuclear tests between 1946 and 1958, including the Castle Bravo hydrogen bomb, the most powerful weapon America ever detonated, after relocating the islanders with a promise they could return. The atoll left so contaminated that its people have never been able to go home. The lagoon holding the sunken target fleet of warships, the radiation in the soil still too high to live on. The islands declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site for what they reveal about the nuclear age, a paradise rendered permanently uninhabitable, the displaced still waiting after 3 generations for a homecoming that may never come. Beirut, Lebanon, the port where, on August 4, 2020, some 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate stored carelessly for years, detonated in one of the largest non-nuclear explosions ever recorded, killing more than 200 people, injuring thousands, and shattering half the city in an instant, captured on 1,000 phones. The grain silos that absorbed part of the blast left standing as a gutted ruin, partially collapsing in the years since. The cause never fully accounted for, no one held responsible. A city already broken by war, broken again by negligence. The wrecked silos still looming over the harbor as the monument no one chose to build. 3 Mile Island, Pennsylvania. The nuclear plant near Harrisburg, where a partial meltdown of one reactor on March 28, 1979, became the most serious accident in American nuclear history and froze the country's reactor construction for a generation, though it released little radiation and killed no one directly. The damaged unit shut down for good, the undamaged unit running for decades more before closing in 2019. Its great cooling towers a fixture on the river, now slated to restart under a new name to power data centers, the most infamous nuclear site in America being switched back on to feed the electricity hunger of the internet. Tangshan, China, the industrial city struck by an earthquake in the early morning of July 28, 1976 that killed at least 240,000 people and possibly far more, leveling almost every building while the residents slept, one of the deadliest earthquakes in recorded history. The city rebuilt entirely from nothing, a new Tangshan rising on the rubble of the old, an earthquake memorial wall inscribed with the names of the dead. A modern city of millions standing where one of the worst single days in human history occurred. The catastrophe remembered in a museum, the survivors built on the ground that swallowed everyone they lost. Galveston, Texas. The island city devastated by a hurricane on September 8, 1900, that killed as many as 8,000 people, the deadliest natural disaster in American history, a storm surge that swept across the low island and left no high ground to flee to. The city's response was to build a seawall miles long and to physically raise the entire grade of the island by pumping in sand beneath the standing buildings, jacking up houses and churches foot by foot. The seawall still standing, the boulevard along it now lined with hotels. The city that refused to abandon a place the sea had proven it could erase, lifting itself out of reach of the water that drowned it. Lac Mégantic, Quebec, Canada. The lakeside town whose downtown was incinerated on July 6, 2013, when an unattended freight train loaded with crude oil rolled downhill, derailed, and exploded in the center of town, killing 47 people and destroying the historic core. The contaminated ground excavated and the soil hauled away, the old downtown rebuilt on a new street grid, a rail bypass constructed to route the oil trains around the town that one of them destroyed. The center of a small Quebec town wiped out by a runaway train and rebuilt a few hundred feet away, the new main street facing the empty space where the old one burned. Exxon Valdez, Prince William Sound, Alaska. The tanker that ran aground on Bligh Reef just after midnight on March 24, 1989, spilling 11 million gallons of crude oil into one of the most pristine marine environments on Earth, coating 1,300 miles of coastline and killing hundreds of thousands of seabirds and marine animals. The reef still there, the sound recovered on the surface, but oil still found beneath the rocks of some beaches when they are turned over, decades after the cleanup was declared finished. The disaster that rewrote oil shipping law, leaving its residue under the gravel of an Alaskan shore that looks, from a distance, as if nothing ever happened. Ayam, Derbyshire, England. The village that, in 1665, received plague-infected cloth from London and chose to quarantine itself entirely, rather than let the disease spread to the surrounding countryside, sealing its own boundary and leaving food and coins in vinegar at the village edge, while the plague killed roughly a third of its people. The cottages still standing, plaques on their doors naming the families who died inside, the boundary stone with its coin holes still in the field. A village that sacrificed itself, voluntarily preserved as a place of pilgrimage, the most famous act of collective self-isolation in history, marked on the same stone walls that contained it. Tunguska, Siberia, Russia. The remote stretch of forest where, on the morning of June 30th, 1908, an object from space exploded several miles above the ground with the force of a large hydrogen bomb, flattening 80 million trees across 800 square miles in an instant. The largest impact event in recorded history. So remote that no scientific expedition reached it for nearly 20 years. The forest since regrown over the radial pattern of fallen trunks. The site of the most powerful cosmic strike of the modern era, now indistinguishable from the wilderness around it. A catastrophe that would have erased a city, leaving almost no trace, because it happened where there was no one to kill. Grenfell Tower, London, England. The residential high-rise that caught fire on June 14, 2017, when flames raced up flammable exterior cladding and consumed the building in hours, killing 72 people in their homes. A disaster of cost-cutting and ignored warnings in one of the wealthiest cities on Earth. The blackened tower left standing for years afterward, wrapped in white sheeting and topped with a green heart, a covered ruin in the middle of the city, while inquiries assigned the blame and survivors waited for justice. Now finally set to be taken down floor by floor. The tower that burned because someone chose the cheaper panels remaining upright far longer than it should have, a vertical grave wrapped in plastic, the most visible disaster in modern Britain, hidden behind a shroud until the city could decide what the ground beneath it should become.